So, what's a business really for? I mean, is its only job to make a pile of cash for shareholders? Or does it owe something more to the rest of us, to society? That's what we're digging into today, that constant tug of war between profit and purpose.
This single question right here, it's pretty much the great dividing line in the entire world of business philosophy. How you answer it probably says a lot about which of two major camps you'd fall into.
Okay, so this whole debate really boils down to two big competing ideas. First, you've got the classical view. It's super straightforward. Management's only social responsibility is to maximize profits. That's it. End of story. But then you have the socioeconomic view, which says, whoa, not so fast. This side argues that a business's responsibility goes way beyond just making money. It's about actively protecting and even improving society's welfare. Right, so this fundamental disagreement, well, it creates what you could call the great debate. And look, there are some incredibly strong, really well thought out arguments on both sides of this thing. So let's get into it, let's unpack them. Okay, so this slide basically lays out the entire intellectual battlefield for us. On one side, in green, you've got all the arguments for social responsibility. Things like meeting public expectations or just having an ethical obligation to do good. Then on the other side, in orange, you see the arguments against it. We're talking about worries over diluting a company's main purpose or the extra costs involved. Let's zoom in a bit and look at the core ideas for each side. So the case for social responsibility, it's pretty compelling, right? The folks on this side argue that, look, in today's world, the public just expects more from businesses. It's not enough to just sell stuff anymore. They also say it can actually lead to bigger profits in the long run. It definitely helps your public image, and honestly, it's just the right thing to do. Plus, let's be real, big companies have the resources, the money, the people to actually make a dent in some of these big social problems. But the other side pushes back, and they push back hard. The against camp says, hey, spending time and money on social goals goes against the number one rule, maximizing profits. They argue it muddies the waters, dilutes the whole purpose of being in business, and racks up extra costs that, guess what, someone has to pay for. And another big point, businesses already have a ton of power. Do we really want to give them even more influence? Some even say that business leaders just aren't the right people for the job. They don't have the skills to tackle social issues. Okay, so how does this whole debate actually play out in the real world? Well, there is no better example, honestly, than how a company decides to handle its impact on the environment. You can almost picture it as a four-step ladder of greenness. On the very bottom rung, you've got the light green or legal approach. This is just doing the bare minimum. You're obeying the laws and regulations, and that's it. Take a step up, and you're at the market approach. Now you're going green because your customers want you to. Higher still, we hit the stakeholder approach. Here, you're listening to everybody, employees, suppliers, the community, and then way up at the top, you have the dark green or activist approach, where a company is actively looking for ways to preserve the environment. And this chart does a great job of showing that progression, right? As a company climbs that ladder from light green to dark green, you can see their environmental sensitivity just skyrockets. It's literally the journey from just, following the rules to making environmental protection a core central part of how you do business. But here's the thing we can't forget. Companies don't make decisions. People do. And that brings this whole conversation down from the big corporate boardroom to the individual level. We're talking about the personal, human element behind every single one of these choices. We're talking about your ethical compass. And at the very heart of that compass is this idea of ethics. I mean, what are they, really? They're just the principles, values, and beliefs inside of you that define what's right and what's wrong. It's that little internal guide that helps you figure out what to do in all those tricky gray areas. So when you're faced with a tough ethical call, how you respond is shaped by your own unique individual characteristics. We're talking about your personal values, sure, but also things like your ego strength, which is basically how strong your convictions are, and this really fascinating concept called locus of control. And that's what we're going to dive into next. So yeah, let's focus on that last one, because it's a really powerful psychological driver of our behavior. It's what psychologists call your locus of control. So this whole concept boils down to one simple but really profound question. Do you believe that you make things happen? If so, that's an internal locus of control. Or do you believe that things happen to you? That would be an external locus of control. To put it another way, Are you the driver, or are you the passenger in your own life?
Let's break that down a bit. Someone with a strong internal locus of control, they believe they're the master of their own destiny. If they get a promotion, they think, yeah, I earned that. I worked hard for it. If they fail a project, they take ownership. On the flip side, someone with an external locus of control tends to feel like outcomes are decided by luck or fate or what other people do. They're way more likely to blame a bad result on outside forces. My boss doesn't like me, or it was just bad luck.
So just take a second here and think about it for yourself, honestly. At work, when things go really well or when they go really badly, what's your first gut reaction? Do you tend to look inward at what you did, or do you immediately look outward at the circumstances around you? Seriously, understanding where you fall on the spectrum, that's a really powerful piece of self-knowledge.
Okay, so while all this individual psychology stuff is super important, it's not the whole story. Organizations themselves aren't just helpless bystanders. They can, and they absolutely should, build systems and create a culture that actively encourages people to do the right thing. So let's take a look at the toolkit they can use to make that happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-pronged attack. First and foremost, it absolutely has to start at the top. You need leadership setting a clear, honest, ethical example. But that's not enough. You also need things like a formal code of ethics that everyone knows, regular training to keep those values top of mind. And this is a big one, making sure job goals are realistic so people don't feel like they have to cheat to succeed. And finally, performance reviews have to reward how you got the job done, not just that you got it done.
And let's be really clear about this. Leadership's role isn't just a nice to have, it's everything. The quote here says it all. Doing business ethically is pretty much impossible without a real, visible, and unwavering commitment from the people in charge. Top managers set the tone for the entire organization.
So, we're going to end by bringing this whole big conversation right back down to you. We've talked about huge corporate philosophies and deep psychological theories, but you know what? It often boils down to a single moment, a single decision. Imagine this. Your boss asks you to bend the rules, just a little, for the good of the company. What do you do? Where do you draw the line? That question, right there, is the real heart of business ethics.